Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Plant Powered Business Strategies to Grow Your Positive Impact. I'm Brieanah, and I'm joined, as always, by my host, Johanna, and our special guest today, Cheryl Moss. Cheryl is an ethical vegan and host of Better Life for Animals podcast, where she shines a spotlight on advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers making a difference for animals every day. Her conversations are heartfelt, inspiring, and always focused on creating a kinder, more compassionate world. Cheryl is also the author of 3 children's books designed to teach children about animals and what loving beings they are. Welcome, Cheryl. We're so excited to talk to you about your journey, your work, and those powerful stories.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today.
Awesome. Diving right in, we love to ask our guests, why vegan? What made you go vegan? Tell us a little bit about your journey.
I was looking into being vegan probably in the 90s and just, cutting things out, recognizing that things weren't right. But it wasn't until I was in my mid 40s when I really thought, you know what, these poor animals, they don't even get a life and I'm done. That's about 18, 19 years ago. And I really have never looked back. And I think that however you get there is great. And, whenever you get there, it's better than not getting there. But I have found that when it hits you at the core, in your heart, that you just don't want those animals to suffer, not for you, that seems to be the stickiest way to become an ethical vegan. So I did that. I've been doing that and for a long time. That was good enough. It's like, I live my life, you live yours. And then, the animals, though, are still suffering. So over time, I got more involved. I did a few things with dogs. I had a Share a Dog app, and that was my first step into rescuing animals and learning about them as family members. But then I think really what hit it for me was COVID, when we were hearing how they were pouring milk out because they didn't have distribution to handle it. And there was a guest on NPR, a famous chef, who was basically saying what the government should be doing is allowing the restaurants to handle all this because we have the distribution. And I'm listening to this podcast, this interview, and I'm thinking to myself, that is the wrong idea. I was thinking this would be an opportunity for society to understand where our food came from and why we don't need it anymore and how things could. It really felt like an opportunity at the time that things were going to change. And I wrote a book about it. I wrote Gabriel first, which was about the veal, the cows and what they go through. It's written for children, though, but so it doesn't go into any kind of detail. But if a parent is reading it to a child, they can ask questions. And that led to, wanting to cover as many of the animals as I could. So I covered all of the cluck is about chickens and turkeys and all the fowl who, suffer horribly. And then, of course, I had to cover pigs. I would love to have covered, many, many more, but those were that's my trilogy. So I wrote those, and that was out there for a while, and they still are. But I'm very involved with Mercy for Animals. It's just one of these areas where the problem is so huge and the participation is so small that nothing you do is ever going to really feel like enough, or at least it doesn't feel like enough for me. So even though I was donating and working with Mercy for Animals, and I still do, I personally love that group, all of these things still didn't feel like enough. So that's when I decided, they talk about, action is really the antidote, right? Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, I'm ready now. I think I can handle doing a podcast just like we're doing today. So I started that about a year ago, and we have been interviewing some fabulous guests. And we've really been concentrating on animal sanctuaries because most of these places, they run on a shoestring, and these people are not necessarily business people, which we can talk about. But, their heart is in the right place, and we certainly want to support that. And we need more of that. I think because I don't know about you ladies, but I live in an pretty urban, suburban area, and I don't really spend a lot of time with farm animals, and that doesn't mean that I want them to suffer. So I think sanctuaries are a very important piece to this where, as we as humans start to make the choices that we don't want to participate in this anymore, we don't need to, and that we can commune with those animals and learn what it's like just to be, because they have a right just to be. that's where I am right now. I think I'm talking pretty fast here, but I'm very excited about it. We've had some great guests, and I'm excited about what's coming for us, because we're going to do a summit, which will air on January 13th, where we're going to really talk about sanctuaries as a business and how there are certain things you need before you even take it on. And if you're struggling, you might want to scrap that plan, and you need a plan, and you need money, and you need certain professionals like you need a lawyer, you need a PR. You do need these things in order to be able to really make it run. So that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Wow. That's a lot of stuff. Like, first of all, it's so exciting to have you here, and thank you for everything you've done until now and are doing. It's also exciting to have you here because you're a fellow podcaster, and we haven't had too many. I think maybe just one before you. So maybe we could talk a little bit more about that. Why specifically podcast as a platform? Like you mentioned, you've done other things before. And maybe also why sanctuaries, like they hold. So I come from Finland, and there are a few sanctuaries there, like run by specifically like ex-activists, like very ethical vegans, and like one of them is run by a close friend of mine, and they hold a very special place in my heart too. And I've seen it, like I've literally like watched my friend make it into a reality. Like she wrote in her diary when she was 16 that I want to have a sanctuary when I'm like older, and now we're both in our 40s, and she's actually made it happen, and it's been so tough and so rewarding. But why podcast, and why specifically sanctuaries? Can you share a little bit more about that?
Well, I think we have to look at what do we have? What can we contribute? And I've written some books. I do work. I still have a job I'm actually in banking. I'm busy. I don't have the situation where I'm going to be out there buying land. I'm not going to be running a sanctuary myself. I'm not a doctor. There are a lot of people that know a lot about cooking and, the health benefits. And there are scientists who can talk about, how this isn't sustainable. All those things we're all familiar. There's a lot of great information out there. I'm not that person. I'm a human with a heart, and I feel like I've woken up, and I'm trying, I think, through example, to encourage other ordinary people to do what they can, because we're not doing enough. I think it's some days, if it's a good day, maybe it's up to 3% of the population that are vegan. That's not enough. And we're not moving the needle at this time. We can talk about that too, but I just think it's going to take more of regular people like myself to just do what they can do. And I thought, well, I have a voice, so I have a computer. This is where, so much of our information is obtained these days. So why not take a shot at it? And then when it came to what did I want to focus on, I was just looking around. Like I said, I'm not an expert. I'm not a doctor, but I do know I have children and grandchildren, and I know about compassion, and I can talk about, they're not here for humans. If they're not serving humans a purpose, then why are they here is what a lot of people, I think, are misinformed. And I think that's where I realize that sanctuaries are trying so hard to do the right thing, and they're forever struggling. They don't have the time to maybe even be on a podcast. They might have a medical, a vet emergency. They need food. They need to fix a fence. It goes on and on. Any of us who can think of, in the olden days, or even now, well, more the olden days, when people would get up before the sun came up and worked all day on the land or with the animals until they went to bed, and that was it. And they didn't go on vacation, and they didn't, there was no time. These animals they're living beings. They need constant care. So these people need help. So we thought, okay, here is a space, a niche that maybe isn't getting enough attention. So that's where we have placed our focus.
I love that. I also love that you're spotlighting those people that wake up early. You really take care of the animals. As a horse owner, not a sanctuary horse owner, but she is a rescue. I am up before the sun. And
Yeah.
so I appreciate you shining that light, even though you're not part of that community. We need more people speaking out for the people that are doing the work and actually in it day to day. So really amazing stuff. I wonder too, in the conversations you're having, if there are common traits that you're noticing among the people that are truly making that difference on the ground for animals.
Well, I think I was so surprised to learn, a couple of the micro sanctuaries that we interviewed, these lovely people, they have a regular job. They get up before they go to that work job. They come back after. And I had no idea. I'm like, wait a minute. How are you doing this? And she said, oh yeah, I have a neighbor who helps me.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, it just broke. It's like, that is commitment on high, right?
Yeah.
But what I've noticed there's some sanctuaries that have policies, they have a business plan, they have, a legacy in place because they know that these animals might outlive them even. And so they have thought it through. They know how they know where their money's coming from. I don't know that that's the case across the board. And, funding is always going to be difficult, and getting people to donate to, most people that donate to animals, it's for their dogs and cats. It's pets,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And I love my dogs. Okay. So I get it, but 3% goes to all the other ones. It became apparent, you can see the ones that are going to be around in 10 years. And you can see the ones that, oh my goodness, how are we going to help you? How are we going to keep this going? So there are the common theme for the ones that are working it. I think they understand that they need recurring investment. They know how to get that recurring investment. They know how to keep their people engaged, just like any well-run nonprofit. You need to make your people feel like you're making a difference. You're helping us. Look what you did. That's what makes people donate. And if you don't have the time, you don't think you can afford a PR person, or maybe you have a volunteer who can do that. But, social media also has its own what works and what doesn't. You got to have consistency. There's all these skills that are required, all these different sets that I don't always know that you see. You rescue a pig or you rescue a goat, and you make, and that starts your sanctuary. I think that's wonderful. Okay. I want to help those people, but if you get to a certain point, you're going to have to go, wait a minute, what's my plan?
Yeah.
Just like any business, right?
Oh, totally. But with animals, it sneaks up on you. All of a sudden you have 10 goats and you're like,
right. Yeah.
when did this happen?
Right. We can't out sanctuary this problem. I may be only able to handle 10 or that number. I can't do 12. There's a business mindset to running a sanctuary, just like everything else. And I think for people to minimize, the money aspect is perhaps naive.
Perhaps a little bit related to that, since to get money, you need to influence people. And one way to influence people are stories. You're a storyteller, and we talk a lot about stories in this podcast because we're both marketers and copywriters and use stories. What's your kind of take on storytelling? You share other people's stories. You've written children's books. How can you make a story resonate with the right audience? I know it's a big question, but what comes to your mind? Something you would like to share about that?
Well, I can remember again around that time when I was making a big change in my life, and it was on NPR, and this person had a pet chicken, and they're talking about all those little habits as he's walking around the house, and he's so curious and cute, and I'm thinking, what? A pet chicken? And it made me realize in that moment, it's like, these birds have a lot more going on than society wants us to know. And it changed me. I was already on my way, but it was just one more piece of evidence that these, birds are very sensitive creatures. I remember going to Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, which is in Utah. They have this whole room that's kind of glassed off. And you can come in and look, but you have to be completely quiet. these birds, some of them have sweaters on because they've mutilated themselves, because they've been so traumatized by, human misuse. And they will never be able to be reintegrated back. So they're living in this thoughtful sanctuary, but it just struck me. So I wanted to cover that in my book. I wanted people, all the things that happen in my books are based on what actually happened. I didn't really make anything up, but I'm hoping that, by when you see that, it's like, why does that bird have a sweater on? So those narratives, those stories are what humans connect with, and we're all trying it all the time to find that one story that resonates for that one person. And you really can't know, which one is going to connect with you, but you have to keep trying. And what I think our discovering is that we need to change the narrative. We need to make it a positive narrative, because that's what works. That's what resonates for people. Personally, I go back and forth on this because the cruelty is so massive that I do want people to know, what's happening. And so I do some of that, not too much, but I understand that isn't going to hit it for most people. And it's the humans that have to change. If we could get it up to 10%, which is a big number from 2 to 3, but it's better than 50, right? If we could get it up to 10%, then we can start having a voice that isn't just, not being part of a majority. We don't really have a lot of power. We just have a conscience, to kind of sway hearts and minds. So to answer your question, I think it's different for every person. I don't know which story is going to resonate with them, but that we just keep putting those stories out there, and one day it will hit. I don't know if you ladies remember the movie Powder. It's an older movie. Well, this boy in the movie, he's kind of an outcast, but he's extremely sensitive. He's very empathic. And there's this scene which very much I was traumatized by it, and I still think about it. There's a hunter out there, and he kills a deer, and the boy sees this, and he puts his hand on the deer at the wound, and he touches the man who has the gun, and he is able to, through this transfer, the man has a heart attack, he thinks, because he feels what this deer is going through. And he is, of course, forever changed. And it's a story, but I remember this is a boy who feels in a way that we as humans, I think, have been trained to cut that off. So he's a little bit of an outcast for that. It's an excellent movie. And that's a story that very much hit for me. I recommend that movie, Powder.
Okay, thanks. Wow.
Yeah.
Just got, shivers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. And we're talking some about the visual aspects of storytelling, right? Do we show the cruelty? How do we convey it to kids? The movie that really spoke to you in that visual aspect of connecting with the deer and the hunter, but also with the podcast and verbally telling these stories. Are there any memorable or surprising moments from your interviews that stick out to you that made those big aha moments for your listeners, perhaps?
Well, for me, I was fascinated to learn about goats. They're not what you think they are. They're much more social. They're actually, people do have them in their homes. I learned that they actually like to eat like bushes, and just people fall in love with goats. Who would have known? Some of the stories I really like are where one sanctuary actually lets them all kind of live together, all of them, and they figure it out on their own. Cows get to be with pigs if that's what they want. Most sanctuaries run it differently. I really like also the sanctuaries that understand that this is a sanctuary for the animals as well as people, but that they don't allow people to disrupt the natural flow of the day-to-day for the animals. So they're very conscious of what does that animal need. And then humans get to come in and observe when it's appropriate. But I am surprised at the wonderful people out there who are doing this kind of work, who think nothing about, they're not looking for fame or money, or they're just doing it because they love these animals. And then I'm thinking of something. When I was at AVA, there was a panel of former undercover investigators. I mean, that work is horrific, right? Mm-hmm. and how do they heal?
Yeah.
And what they were saying is they have to go spend like a month at a sanctuary and just, repair, ask for forgiveness, but also, understanding that we're trying to do. I just thought that was what a wonderful thought that, sanctuaries heal humans.
Yep.
Yeah.
So true. So true. Even just having our own animals, right? I think we can all attest to that. I work in animal advocacy as well as my clients, and some of the things I read, some of the things I see, I then go and hug my dog. Like, okay, we're making a step forward, but I need this anchor to know that you're okay. And here we go.
Well, that's my favorite is that, and we've all seen it, the split. Here, this is your dog. This is a pig. This is your cat. This is a cow. That connection that you have with that animal.
Right.
How do we translate and transfer that to something else?
Yeah.
That's the big question, right?
Yeah. And I think we've made some headway. Like, we're starting to see Beyond Meat on more menus, but it is slow progress. I'll give you that. But 5 years ago, we wouldn't have seen that on a menu. So it's come, and people are starting to see the sentience of farmed animals as well.
I agree with you. What I've been thinking about is having a 100% plant-based restaurant in some areas is still a tall order. But you do see vegan options. And what I'd like to see are ways to make those vegan options not just be, and here's your vegan menu, for you one vegan over there. No one else, don't you look at it. It's not for you. You would like it, Instead, to integrate it into that menu, it's a plant-based, it's a vegetable, it's a fruit, it's a grain, right in there with everything else. And you just make that choice, because when people go, well, what do you eat? It's like, I eat everything else, I'm trying to figure out that part. It's like, how do we make it just more, not so polarizing?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and you can do so much, like talking about menus with the actual naming of dishes, and also the placement. I think there's a lot of studies or custom market research about that. And I wanted to comment on what you said before about this, how healing other animals are, in investigators going to heal at sanctuaries. I think that's one of the such heartbreaking, sad things about how the state of affairs, especially these Western societies, that we're missing the connection that we're missing with other animals, all the potential there. Not that other animals are there for us humans, or that should be the norm, but I'm sure you understand where I'm getting at, these beautiful one-on-one relationships that so many people can never even imagine. Or I've always had animals around me all my life, and it's why I became a vegan. So it's just really heartbreaking. A little bit more about your books. You mentioned that you've written 3 children's books. Are you planning to write more, or maybe even for adults? Or why specifically? I forgot now if you already mentioned that, why you decided to write children's books.
We have to get early. We have to get it to kids when they're young. We interviewed a plant-based school in Florida. Yeah, she's incredible. And she has a sanctuary. She's going to be at the summit. But it's this is what we need. When she first went plant-based, some parents pulled their kids out. Now she's back to being full, but this is where it needs to start. I think it needs to be normalized, because you got these kids that are being fed chicken McNuggets and whatever, and kids want to be part of the social structure. They don't want to be different. So I really feel like we need to start young. They're not thinking the animal is something separate from them. They're not thinking that this animal is only of use if it's useful for me. They don't think like that. We get trained. That's why I felt like I wanted to start with children. And I found this beautiful illustrator. She's in Spain, and I love the idea of these books. They're saturated in color. I feel like that makes it a very inviting experience, for everyone, including children, to, enjoy the pictures. So I feel like we need to start young. If I were going to write a book again, I would probably, perhaps, at some point, write something about my experiences with sanctuaries and how, best practices. Maybe we can help build a blueprint for, what works and what, how we can, strengthen what we have. Because, unfortunately, we have all these other forces in our favor. I say that like this because, as we are destroying this planet, which we may not have one, we are also, that will, I would hope, make people go, wait a minute, what's going on here? We have mowed down most of the, the trees, things that keep the lungs of our earth are being, shut off. So those things are disease. You would think, I would have thought that with the pandemic and people, seeing that this was, animals being contained in close spaces where disease is rampant, that there would be some light bulbs that would go off. But all these forces, sadly, are still in play. So we have, those things are happening. Meanwhile, we all have a choice. We all have a chance to make a different, decision. It's an interesting time to be alive because I think we all know, I think we'd all agree that, there'll come a point, I like to think it's sooner, but let's say 20 years from now, people will go, we did what? We used to do what? That's horrible. That's coming. Mm-hmm. But I want it to come because we, as people, have expanded our, awareness. We have opened our channels of compassion. But it could also become because it's not sustainable. We can't continue to have that. So we come up with alternatives. I think it's going to be a combination of both.
Yeah, I agree with you. When you say that it's in the future, I think of all my grandmother's recipes that used Crisco very heavily, and we don't use that anymore as much as we did then, right? So it's got
beef tallow. Beef tallow is back on the menu.
Yeah,
that's true. That's true. We did do a little
that is just there. Mind-boggling. Yeah.
I know. Okay, we'll keep our fingers crossed that we're moving to where we can say, wow, I can't believe we used to do that.
Yeah.
Switching gears a little bit, many of our listeners are vegan entrepreneurs and advocates themselves. Is there advice that you would give someone who wants to start sharing stories like this to help create that change in the movement? I mean, one of the reasons Johanna and I started this podcast was to try and give back to the movement. You're trying to give back to the movement with the stories that you share. What advice would you give to someone that's like, I don't know where to start, I don't know how to help, but I know I want to?
Well, I'm assuming that they want to help and they have a product or a service.
Sure.
And, so therefore it's about, I think about all the wonderful vegan, plant-based, cruelty-free options now in purses and shoe wear and all the different materials that are out there that people are using, all the different beauty products that are cruelty-free, the wonderful food options. If you're, it depends on what you are. Are you looking to cook? Are you looking to design? What is your area? But I think if you can connect your new product, perhaps with, those images of these animals are not going to be affected by this clean product. This no longer needs to happen. We've got this, give it a try. I am a consumer of all of those products. Say we're clean, we would never test on an animal, apple leather, all these new products are so cool. I'm like, I would love to know more about that. Let's see, it's very expensive, but I'm a huge fan of Stella McCartney. I can't always afford it, but she's the pioneer, right? And then back to, new ways to make food that people, are used to eating. It's like, this something that people feel like it's a comfort food or, we're getting better all the time. Cheese is getting so much better. I mean, when people try something and they, it doesn't taste just exactly like the other type, it's like, okay, maybe it won't taste exactly the same, but it could still taste really, really good. And don't give up. Don't give up because people are recreating. I had Miyoko Shinner on my show, and she's got a whole book on, creamery, vegan creamery. She's making all kinds of cheeses. There's nothing to be afraid of. It's, it's made out of nuts or seeds. Let's talk about what the alternative is made out of,
Right.
Yeah.
It's very true. And because you brought up Miyoko, I have to do a shout out to her pizza cheese.
Yeah.
The one that you pour onto your pizza. Hey, it's been a while since I've had a non-vegan pizza. I'll say that, but it's pretty close to what I remember.
Yeah.
So we are getting much better. Yeah.
Absolutely. There's science behind it, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And there are scientists who are in this space, thank goodness. What we really want is, some government assistance, because this is a big problem and it requires big money, but we didn't have it before. We're not getting it now, but tomorrow's another day.
Keep trying, keep innovating with us. Yeah, absolutely.
Bree just mentioned earlier that like most of our listeners are actually like vegan business owners and people like that. But like, let's keep talking about like advocacy a little bit more. What's your take on like where animal advocacy is these days? I know it's also like a very big question. Are you like seeing some new approaches or voices that excite you, or like is there something missing? Like if you want to share some ideas out there, or if you had more, I don't know, hours in the day, what more would you want to do?
We need different laws, but before we get different laws, we have to change how people see things. And so that's what the work of an advocate is, I think, at this point. It's, making you realize you don't want to participate in that, and understanding that all the subsidies are going to the most harmful, cruel systems. It's a system problem, And so people, just like, local politics, you have to get started at right here, one person. What can one person do? And with enough people going, I don't want to participate in that anymore. Or even enough people, when you go to the restaurants, buying the plant-based options. I mean, that's where it gets the capitalists' attention, right? It's like, okay, they're buying it. They don't really care, right? They just want to sell something. So, if we buy these, if they can make it attractive and more people are willing to buy it and lean into it and move away from, the other things. I mean, it can happen. I like to think of like, Mothers Against Drunk Driving. One day they just said, I'm done with this. We are not okay with, this, slap on the hand. You're not going to get in the car and drive under the influence and take out my child. And that has changed in my lifetime. Cigarettes, another one. Cigarettes used to be, if you watch an old movie, everybody's smoking. It was like the thing to do, right? And now we don't. So it can happen. And those are a couple of the examples that I like to lean into. It's like, we can change our mind. This is the beautiful thing about being a human, is we could change our mind on a dime.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I wish more people would. We can change our mind on a dime, but I wish more people would. And with that, we've kind of danced around it. You've mentioned it. You've given an example of it. But many advocates and entrepreneurs in this space experience burnout, right? All three of us have probably gone through it more than once. Are there any practices or routines that would help you stay inspired that you could share with others that are listening?
Yes, I have definitely had my moments. Believe me, I've hired a therapist over it. Okay, I've done so many things, because some days I just can't stand being in this body. It's like, this is just so sad. And, that humans, while we can do good, we choose most often not to, or we just default to what's easy and convenient. There have been times when I don't like participating, and yet here I am, right? My answer, and I've worked through it, and I'm sure I'll go back. I have my moments, but you got to get back up the next day. Because two things, the animals, they're not getting anything out of my being depressed. Right. I'm not helping anybody. Whereas, as long as they're suffering, they deserve our participation, our advocacy. And, and then the other thing I will say is that, and we've all heard this, is that action is an antidote for depression. So whatever is bothering you, if it doesn't set right with you, you can do something. You can like things. You can, not have that latte today and, donate to Rooster the hamster, or a pig that needs surgery, or a chicken that is being offered to a sanctuary. There are opportunities all day long, as we all know, to do what you can. It doesn't have to be more than that, but just keep doing it. And I think if you're doing your part, the movement has an opportunity to grow. And then, of course, it's so true that we have to support one another, right? It's so important to get together once in a while and talk about it and talk about how difficult it feels and how disappointing it is and, how tragic it is. And here comes Thanksgiving and all the things. So we need that support. It's very common that, you might be the only plant-based person in your house. It happens, but that doesn't mean that there aren't others like you who are there to support you.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah,
I love what you said of like, do what you can. I feel like people put way too much pressure on themselves. So I just want to shout that from the rooftops.
Right.
Just do what you can. It's enough.
Right.
Yeah.
How can I help animals? Is what I'm doing helping animals? As Jane Goodall said, everything you do makes a difference. It has an impact. Yep.
Yeah, it really does. And I love what you said about this, surrounding yourself with at least some people, or like finding those connections to people who get what you do, because we live in this like very individualistic world and times where a lot of like responsibility is put on the individual, and it is true, but it's also, especially when you're going against the grain, like when you're trying to like change the status quo, it's like you need like a support structure around that. And we're like, social beings. It's so important. For my journey, I've had like animal rights activists around me from since I was like in my teens, and it's made all the difference. So like whatever form that takes, and whatever like your journey, like as a listener, whether you're an advocate or business owner or anything else, any kind of change maker, I'm sure. Like I hope everybody understands it, that it's so important to have those people around you. And sometimes you forget. I also sometimes find myself like, hey, wait, like when did I like really like connect with or like talk about this with somebody?
There are so many options in today's, Zoom world, right? There's vegan Toastmasters, as an example. They're wonderful. You have an opportunity to be with kindred spirits, get a little bit of practice to speak on the topic. It's very supportive. There's Ava, there's even Reducitarian. So many of these conferences that go around the country are really, I always feel my battery has been recharged. It's like, these are my people. It feels so, we need community.
Yeah, exactly.
So find it in person, but also if you can't, or if it's not available all the time, depending, there are other outlets, online.
Yeah. I think we have time for a couple of more questions. If you had the chance to interview like anybody in the world, like whether they're like still around or have passed away already, like about creating a better world for animals, who would you want to interview for your podcast or just for fun?
Well, I will say this at some point. I hope to have Leah Garces on my show. Now, I know her. I admire her. I'm so in awe of her journey and how she's written 2 books herself. She just put out this wonderful little short called Henrietta. It's so sweet. I have the coloring books for my grandkids. So this is a real effective, yes, she has a platform. Of course, she's got, she is the CEO of Mercy for Animals, and that absolutely helps. But she also walks her talk, and she's lived it. If you read her books, Grilled or The Transformation, this is a person who's not only invested in it, but she's always looking for how do we make an impact? What celebrity do I need to get the word out? She's, I happen to know that she's even transitioned away from they've hired a president in order for her to be the CEO so that she can be out more. I'm sure she gets upset. I'm sure she gets down. Of course she must. But I remember one time she was on the Ezra Klein show and he was interviewing her, and it was a great interview. And Ezra's going, now, I want you to know I'm not a vegan. My family's not a vegan. And she just lets him say it. She so eloquently just goes, there's a moment of silence. And then she says, I'm vegan. My husband's vegan. I have 3 children. They're vegan. In other words, without saying it, she's like, it is completely possible to have a vegan family, and she wasn't going to go into this, oh, that's okay. She wasn't going to say that. I admire that. I admire her delivery and her presence.
I love that. Oh, that would be a really cool guest. I hope that you get to have that conversation. I will be listening.
Yeah.
As we wrap up here, how can people keep in touch? Where can we find your podcast? What's the best way for us to continue to learn from you and the conversations you're having?
Absolutely. Well, I have a website, and it's, as it sounds, it's all spelled out, betterlifeforanimals.com. And everything that I'm working on is on that. You can access all of our shows, all of our podcasts, information on our books. We have a blog. You can sign up and subscribe. Love to have you.
Fabulous. Well, thank you so much, Cheryl. Johanna and I, with our background in advocacy, could talk to you all day. Unfortunately, we promise our listeners to keep these under an hour. So we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. But thank you for sharing your wisdom, your advice, and all the work that you do for animals. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And I feel the same about you. It was such an honor to be here.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thank you from me too. And all the best with the summit at the start of next year. Hopefully that goes amazingly.
Thank you. Looking forward to it.